I'm Lucy, and I'm confused. Until a week ago, everything was so simple. I went to school, then I worked part-time at a pizza place to help my mom, who was raising me herself. But I wasn't complaining. Yes, we lived very modestly in one of the poorest neighborhoods in New York City, but it was a simple life. And now I'm trapped in a real brutal trap. Hear me out, please. Or without your advice, I'm afraid I can't figure it out on my own. It all started a week ago at the pizzeria where I worked part-time after school. There was a heavy downpour and a thunderstorm. The small pizzeria was overcrowded. I was knocking my feet for the second hour, taking all the orders. Suddenly, the door to the pizzeria opened with a bang, and a huge man in a black suit and glasses walked in. After shrugging off the customers, he walked nonchalantly over to the counter and said dryly, "A double espresso and the best pizza. My boss is waiting in the car. Make it to go. Keep the change." And I was just about to argue that we don't do takeouts, but the bill on the counter silenced me. Don't get me wrong, I don't usually do this, but I figured out in my head how much the tip would be, and I realized that it was my mom's monthly salary. A few minutes later, I pulled up to the luxury black limo that was parked outside the pizza place. The door opened, and I was gestured for a seat. Inside sat a man in a luxury suit and smiled sweetly at me. He asked me how old I was and how long I had worked here. I answered honestly. Then he praised me for my speed of ordering. He moved closer to me and quietly suggested, "I have a son your age, but he's a terrible loser. I haven't had time to raise him because I'm so busy. His mother died early, and the nannies spoiled him more than they raised him." He kept talking and talking about his son, and I could tell that the man loved and cared a lot about his son Philip. And then he said things that were impossible to believe. You'll find out what he said in a minute. But for now, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And make sure you have the bell clicked, then you'll know when there's a new video coming out on the channel. And this rich man offered me a contract. I get to know his son, fall in love with him, date him, thereby shielding him from the bad company he is in now. And for this, I will be paid a good sum every month and put a tidy sum on my account for my education in the future. And I'm obligated to re-educate Philip in 3 months and get him to do what his father wants. It all sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? On the one hand, it seems not right, using me for money, taking advantage of the guy. But on the other hand, the man described Philip's creepy behavior in such detail, how many times he'd picked him up inappropriately from the police station, that I felt sorry for that poor father. And I said yes. So, how it started? Legend has it I'm a rich girl who's new in town. My parents have a big business. I go to a private school. I could only see Philip after school. They took me to the stylist, handed me a big box of brand-name clothes, and money for my daily petty expenses. When I saw my new self in the mirror, I was surprised and frightened at the same time. Could I really be that beautiful? How quickly clothes and a new style change a person. Our acquaintance was set up in a cafe near the mansion where Philip and his father lived. After school, Philip would stop by here to buy his favorite sushi or salad. That's where he and I ran into each other. One thing led to another, and I had no trouble getting the guy to like me. But the Philip I met in the cafe was not at all the creepy monster his father talked about. Philip was a gentle and calm guy with a great sense of humor. And we sat for more than an hour in the cafe, chatting merrily. I liked him. As soon as the driver took him home, his father called me. I told him everything in detail. He was pleased. I said that Philip was a very nice guy, but the man cut me off abruptly, saying that it was none of my business to speculate and that I just had to get the job done. It was frustrating, but I understood that he was dictating terms. The next day, Philip and I were scheduled to go for a walk in the park. I waited at the entrance. As usual, Philip was dropped off by the driver. 2 hours flew by unnoticed. We talked about books, music, and movies. Our tastes were very much the same, and I kept asking myself, When at last I would finally see the real Philip, ugly, rude, vulgar, but it was the opposite. The guy was polite and well-mannered. I realized that I was beginning to fall in love with him, and I don't want to date him for money. After our date, I called his father and told him I was breaking my contract with him. I can't cheat on Philip because he's a good guy. Oh, how Philip's father started yelling at me on the phone. He said he was going to destroy me and that I'd regret my decision so much, but I didn't care anymore. And now my life has become a nightmare. Philip's father started to take revenge on me. First, they fired me from the pizzeria. Then they kicked my mother out of her job. And then the landlord of the room we rented suddenly doubled the rent. We were out on the street, and it's all my fault. I can still turn things around and agree to continue the assignment. We would go back to our place. My mother would go to work, but I would have to betray myself or live on the street. What would you do? Write to me. I'm trapped, and I don't know how to go on.
Hi, I'm Bonnie, and I have a twin sister, Becky. After one unpleasant incident, I now always mention when introducing myself that I have a twin, and here's why. When I was 14, I met Simon. He was the new kid at our school, but he became super popular right away. Tall with a good athletic body, he immediately attracted attention of everyone, and mine too. It turned out that he and I had a common hobby. We both liked to skate, and I found it out in the town park after a couple of days. We started skating together on weekends and sometimes after school. We kissed for the first time on roller skates, and I realized that I fell in love with this guy, and it was mutual. If he and I were going to the same school, why didn't he see my sister, you ask? Becky went to a different school. She was a math genius, so she got into a prestigious math school after junior high. She and I got along great, but in my heart, I was glad Simon didn't know her. Becky was not only a very smart girl, but also had a great sense of humor, and she had a lot of boys chasing her. So I was really worried that Simon would leave if he met her. He and I agreed to meet one Saturday night at our favorite spot near the town lake. I arrived at the agreed time, but Simon wasn't there yet. After waiting a half an hour, I called him. There was no answer. I texted him, and there was silence again. It was strange. Simon was usually always on time. An hour later, I returned home upset. What could have happened? I couldn't help thinking the most terrible things. It could have been an accident, or could have been kidnapped, or... Hold on. I dialed his home number, and Simon's mother answered. She said he was fine and that he was out with friends. So, he deliberately doesn't pick up the phone when I call? And he's not answering my messages? But why? I didn't sleep very well that night. And this morning at school, when I saw Simon, I ran up to him. Simon, what's happening? Why did you tell me, Bonnie, what happened yesterday? Yesterday? I saw you yesterday with another guy in the park. You were kissing. My insides went cold. Was I wearing a red dress? I whispered. Why are you asking me? Yes, you were, and you were hugging another guy, Bonnie. I figured it out. Simon saw my sister Becky with her boyfriend last night and assumed it was me. Now I have to introduce them to each other if I want to keep my relationship with Simon. And I didn't want that to happen. In the evening, I knocked on the door of Simon's house. He opened the door. I don't want to see you, Bonnie. You betrayed me. Wait, I protested. Meet my twin sister, Becky. And Simon saw two girls who looked just like each other. Hi, Simon. I'm Becky. Nice to meet you. I explained to Simon that he'd seen Becky yesterday. I'd been waiting for him at our favorite spot in the park the whole time. Why didn't you tell me you had a twin sister? I was afraid, Simon. I was afraid that once you met her, you'd break up with me. Bonnie's so cool. She's really smart and funny. Don't be ridiculous, Bonnie. I don't want Becky. I love you, he said, and he held me tight against his arm. From that day on, sometimes the four of us would hang out together. Simon, me, Becky, and her boyfriend. We had a lot of fun together, and I wished I had introduced my sister to my boyfriend earlier. So now I always tell people when I meet them that I have a twin sister. So there won't be any more misunderstandings like that. What do you think? Was it right that I introduced Becky to Simon? Do you have a twin sister or brother? Have you had any funny incidents happen to you? Write to me. I'm looking forward to read your stories.